Every election cycle, we always hear about the same two political parties, Democrats and Republicans. Now, as a result of this, over the years, people have kind of resigned themselves to thinking about elections in terms of a two-party system. But the fact remains there are multiple parties that exist in the United States. You have Democrats, you have Republicans, you have independents, the largest voting bloc in the country, almost 50%. You have libertarians, you have the Green Party, you have the Socialist Party, the Democratic Socialists of America, the Communist Party, the Federalists. You name it, man. There's so many groups out there. And yet, everybody just tends to think of all these other parties as white noise. And you know why? You want to know why that is? Societal conditioning. Ever since we were young, we've heard about the Democrats and Republicans, and we've heard it's a two-party system. It's a two-party system. And just like learning a language, when it's best to be exposed to that when you're young, we've been exposed to that when we were young as well. This two-party system, and we grew up with the two-party system. So it's very difficult for most people to conceive of having more than two parties in an election. And as a result, you get this spoiler mentality of, oh, well, if the Greens are running, they're spoiling it for the Democrats. And that's the only one you usually hear about. It's really funny how you never hear about Republicans blaming libertarians for handing elections to Democrats when they run. Case in point, the 2016 election, there were some out there, the Hillary supporters, who said Jill Stein handed the election to Trump. If she wasn't running, Donald Trump might not have won. Or he wouldn't have won. Jill Stein only got 1% of the vote. And I was one of the ones who voted for her, yes. Call me a Ruski if you want to. I really don't care. It's not going to make it true. But guess who else was running? Gary Johnson. Gary Johnson was running on the Libertarian ticket. So, if Hillary Clinton had won, do you think you would hear the Republicans whining and complaining about the Libertarian candidate handing the election to the Democrat? You wouldn't hear that. You never hear that from the right. As much as I disagree with the right, and I disagree with them on many things, I have to hand it to them on one thing. They'd never complain to a third party about handing the election to their opponent. Because at least they understand what an election is. They understand that every vote has to be fought for. Now, the corporate Democrats, on the other hand, they think they're entitled to the votes. It's really disgusting. And it's part of how the Democratic establishment keeps their base in line. Saying, oh, you vote for third party, you're going to hand it to the Republican, they're evil, vote for us. Hey, guess what, corporate Democrats? You're evil too. You serve the same wealthy donors. And I've got a little mental exercise for you guys that's really going to show how you can flip this whole thing on its head. Now, let's say, for example, if we take this election cycle, we have, of course, the Democrat Joe Biden. We have the Republican Donald Trump. We have the Green Party candidate. A lot of people don't know him yet, but a Green Party candidate named Howie Hawkins and his vice presidential running mate, Angela Walker. Look them up for yourself. You can find him on www.howiehawkins.us. That's who's running there. Again, www.howiehawkins.us. I'll put the link at the bottom of the page. So you're going to have to look up these third-party candidates for yourself, because the mainstream corporate media is not going to let you know that these other parties even exist. And when they do mention them, they're going to say, oh, they spoiled it, they handed it, they're threats, they're Russian plants, or something like that. But none of that is true. None of that is true. Now, I also heard of someone named Joe Jorgensen. I could be making that name up, but it was somebody I saw in one poll who was on the Libertarian ticket. I could be mistaken about that. Anybody who knows better, feel free to let me know in the comment section, or I'll research it later. But anyway, let's, for the sake of argument, say that we just had the three, okay? So you have the Democrat, you have the Republican, you got the Green candidate. Now, the Democratic establishment is going to say, uh-oh, Green voters are going to give it to Trump. Well, what if all these Democratic voters went Green? What would happen then? Well, let's, for example, say 55% of the voters voted Democrat and 45% voted Republican. Of all voters, let's just keep it simple. All right. Well, what happens if that 55%, or even, 50% 53% for the sake of argument, flipped over to the Green Party. What happens? You get 53% for the Green Party, 45% for the Republican, 2% for the Democrat. That other 2% didn't go to the Republican. All right? The empty 2% that you saw did not go to the Republican. It pushed the Democratic candidate to the margins. Likewise, if you had a Libertarian running, like let's use the 2016 election again for simplicity here. Let's say that, initially Donald Trump won the election. We know that. Okay. Popular vote went to Hillary, but let's keep it simple for this case. Let's say Donald Trump won. There are 100 votes. Let's say Donald Trump won about 55. Let's use the same numbers, 55, 45. So let's say he got 55 of the votes, and Hillary got 45, and the other two candidates got nothing. Well, what happened if the Libertarian had won? What if the Libertarian got, say, 50% of the vote, and Donald Trump got 30% of the vote, and Hillary Clinton got 20% of the vote? In a popular contest, that means the Libertarian won. Now, what does that mean electorally? Well, that's a pretty big mess. And none of the candidates would likely reach the majority, and it would head to the House of Representatives to decide the president. Well, what happens, though, if the electoral vote swings in favor of the Libertarian in this case? Well, let's say that those Republican votes for Trump, the 55% all went to, or 53% like before, all went to Gary Johnson. And the 2% went to Donald Trump. And the 45% remained with Hillary. Well, what do you got there? Those votes that gave the election to the Libertarian, did it hand it to the Democrat? No, it didn't. It didn't. The Libertarian would have won that. So the inverse of that, just as I explained before, if it had flipped around like that, the Green Party candidate would have won, not the Republican. So this whole two-party argument and this sense of entitlement, especially that the Democratic Party has, is just, it's nonsense. It's all nonsense. It's childish. It's entitled. It is so whiny and embarrassing. Come on, man. You're adults. This is democracy. Act like it. You believe in democracy, stop trying to label these other parties as Russian agents. They're not. There are parties that exist in the United States. So there you go. I mean, that's how it works. You have multiple parties. All you got to do is, if you don't like the Democrat or Republican, just look for the other candidate and vote for that candidate. Don't worry. This is another big thing here. Don't worry about what the person next to you is going to vote for. If we all individually did our own thing, like we usually do now with these scenarios, and we all took it upon ourselves to look up third parties and vote for those third parties, the elections would swing in favor of those third parties. They would. And it would push the two corporate parties to the margins. That's how that works. If you've got a fixed number of votes, let's say 100. Now, you usually think of it in terms of two parties, 50-50 for the sake of argument. Well, what happens when you get rid of those two parties and replace it with a third option? At least for the majority of the votes. Let's say the third party option got 75% of the votes and the other two combined made up the last 25%. Did those 25 votes just suddenly give the election to one of the two candidates that made up the 25%? No, it didn't. The third party would have won. That's how that works. So this two-party mindset is nothing more than a projection of entitlement. And they want to be entitled to your vote because that keeps them in power. It keeps them getting rich. It keeps that revolving door going. It keeps the corruption going. And it keeps bilking us dry and makes them even more powerful. So that's what we got to remember. When we head into these elections, when you see a third candidate, look that candidate up. Don't be afraid to mark the box of the third candidate, regardless of what it is. I told you before, the Green Party, if you're a Democratic voter, vote Green Party this time. If you're a Republican and are Libertarians running, vote for the Libertarian. We can replace these two corrupt parties with other ones. It's not impossible. It's just a matter of political will and a matter of actually doing it. And again, you have to research these candidates on your own because the media is not going to tell you about them. So like, share, subscribe to this channel. This video is particularly important when it comes to voting and spreading democracy around, because alternative parties are possible. They do exist. And we can change this entire system. And this is part of how we do it. And one last thing before I go. What would happen if, for instance, the Green Party won this time around, and then, like, say, 75% of the vote went to the Green Party and they won the Electoral College? But what if they said, okay, we're totally going to discard all these votes and just focus on the 25% and make up some cockamamie number and present it as if the Republican or the Democrat won? Well, that proves something, right? It proves that the establishment is in cahoots with one another. The media, the two political parties, all them, the corporate people on Wall Street, the ones who fund the campaigns of those two parties. It would show that they're in cahoots. They don't care about democracy. They don't care about your vote for real. As long as you stay within their parameters, they won't mess with it nearly as much. So basically what happens then, if the Green Party candidate had won, for example, if they focused on the 25% that made up the Democrat and Republican voter base there, well, then their declaration would be illegitimate. The president shown to be elected by their numbers, by their proclamation, would be illegitimate. And the Green Party candidate would be the rightful president, and this would just be a massive coup attempt. That's what that would be. And then the mask would really be off. So don't think voting third party is a wasted vote. It's not a wasted vote. It's just a vote, like any other. You vote for Democrat, you vote for Republican, you vote Independent, you vote Libertarian, you vote Green, you vote Communist, you vote Democratic Socialist, you vote Federalist or Progressive Party, whatever it is. It doesn't matter. It's a vote. It's a vote. That's all it is. It's a vote, and it counts. So don't let these two parties tell you otherwise. Don't let the media brainwash you into thinking otherwise. Nothing they tell you about this subject is going to be true. If you flip the vote around, we have it within our power to flip this thing. You look up the Green Party candidate. If we all decided to vote for that candidate, at least a huge majority of us did, and we caught the Green Party candidate winning the Electoral College, well, guess what? The Green Party candidate's the next president. That's how that works. Remember, Abraham Lincoln was the third party candidate when he won. Who's to say it can't happen again, Let's give these guys a taste of their own medicine. Let's push them to the margins. Let's push these two corporate parties to the margins where they truly belong, because they truly are the representatives of the minority. We need someone who is a majority representative. So this is a good time, guys. There's never been a better time to really show what we can do as voters, what we can do as citizens. Let's get out there and make it happen. Let's not buy into this propaganda anymore. Let's realize that we are the ones who have the real power. And all the power the media and the establishment think they have, it's all borrowed from us. And we have the authority and the power to take it back from them like that. So let's do this thing.